Hello, and welcome back. I'm Multeyemeteor. This is the Act of War deck, and we're playing some Magic 2013 in case you didn't know. Yesterday I did a introduction video of the, a different video, introduction video than I've done before for the 5 previous decks in the previous DLC. It's a bit cumbersome to go through making these introductions, especially when Wizards haven't put out any official text that describes the guilds. So I can choose to scrouch around and try to find something to put together an intro, or I can just get down to business. And I think it would be in you guys' interest to go ahead and do the latter. So yeah, I actually like this deck a lot. I thought it would be easier to put together a good deck from the get-go, but I don't think that's the case, because this deck kind of wants to be aggressive, but it also kind of want to be filled with battle tricks and so on. And there are some cards in it that don't really serve the purpose or don't play along with the theme. And one of them I've actually chosen to include in the deck because it's good in other ways. But yeah, this deck is all about battle tricks. It is not like last year's deck, March to War, which was all about control. Last year's deck was kind of like Peacekeepers mixed with some very controlly elements. For example, Searing Meditation with the combo of Aura. What's it called? No, it's called Soul Warden, of course. Different kinds of life-gaining techniques that gave you the ability to, while you gained life, kill off a bunch of your opponent's creatures. A very cool combo, and it made for a very controlly deck. You could also run it entirely mono-white if you wanted to, which made it much more like the Peacekeepers deck, except that it didn't have those late-game bombs, but just a lot of weenies. Very strong as well. But yeah, this year's deck is more of a it does have some early game spells and creatures, a lot actually, but you can also build it towards a mid game and late game, so it's not entirely consistent of weenie creatures. But yeah, let's take a look at it. As you'll see, the mana curve in my build is pretty smooth. Actually very smooth, and you definitely have a lot of cheap creatures or spells in general to go with. As always, I've said goodbye to the Terramorphic Expanse. I am very content with my place in society, and I do not need to terramorph anything to expand my my guild. The Boros will have to do to make do with the place that they've been assigned to. Assault Strobe, I run one of them. I think it's not a great card. I mean, the reason I run one of them is that in some situations it's incredible, because you'll have a chance to swing in where your opponent definitely doesn't have a chance of doing anything about it. And there are cards to buff your creatures, and then you get in for one attack where one guy is just buffed to the moon, and then you make him double strike, and that's a bomb. That's an end game spell in that sense. But it's a lot of the time it's going to sit in your hand, and it's just going to do lackluster things or mediocre things. So I don't think there's a need to run 2 of them. Boros Recruit is, I guess, pretty nice. It's a nice little 1-drop. The nice thing about it is that no matter if you have a mountain or a plane in your first turn, or if you drop one of those, you get to drop this guy, and it's a 1/1 first striker. Nothing special, basically. Rise of Hobgoblins, I run one of them. Oh, by the way, I run two of the Boros Recruit. Rise of the Hobgoblins, I run one of them because I think two is overkill, but one is nice because there are enough cross buffing for this this card to be significant. Even if you drop it turn 5 or land drop 5, you get 3 hobgoblins and you get the ability to make all your creatures into first strikers whenever you pay just 1 mana of either color. And that's pretty nice. But the fact that these guys are red and white means that you have some effect that'll buff them not just +1/+1 but +2/+2. So that's pretty good. To arms, I think I run one of them. I thought 2 was a little bit too much because there's also another card that does pretty much the same, except that it doesn't draw your card, but it does buff your power or your creature's power. It's a decent card, I guess. The best thing about it is that it's a combat trick that will surprise your opponent until you've done it enough times that he kind of expects it. But the second best, or perhaps even more so, in many other instances, you'll be dropping this or casting this spell just to draw that card. That is fairly significant. Veteran Armorer, I think I run 3 of them. I think 4 is a bit much, at least because this deck has enough good cards. You don't need too many, but I like to have a lot of these guys because it makes my side very difficult to kill, and you'll usually end up having at least 1 or even 2 down at the same time, making it so that your opponent either have to use destroy or exile spells to remove your cards, or use a lot of burn or big creatures to kill your well, realistically speaking, tiny creatures. So yeah, Benalis Veteran, I thought he was okay, but I think he's a little bit expensive. It's nothing special. In essence, it's a 2/2 for 3, but when it attacks, it becomes a 3/3. It's actually it sounds pretty mediocre, but it's actually worked out for me. So I could definitely see bringing this card along, because swinging with 3 is going to be a huge difference from your Boros recruits who just swing in with 1. But it is a little bit more expensive, so you're not going to be like at turn 3 you might have better cards, and in my case I want to be dropping those Sky Knight Legionnaires instead. Another thing is that it's not dual colored. If it was dual colored, then I would definitely consider running 1 or 2 of them. Fire at Will. Here's a card that I really thought was awesome before I started unlocking the cards, and by unlocking also deck testing, albeit against the computer. I found that many times, it's a 3 cost, by the way, instant, and it gets to deal 3 damage divided as you choose among 1, 2, or 3 target attacking or blocking creatures. I found that the times that I felt like using this card the most was when my opponent hadn't attacked, hadn't declared attackers or blockers yet. Attackers, okay, fine. Blockers, it's kind of like it works the best if you have first strikers, I would say. And many times you have to kind of like finagle your way into a situation where this card is really useful. So I only run 1 of them because sometimes it's just going to be sitting in your hand as kind of a dead card. Well, this is my early opinion. I might end up changing my mind. Mentor of the Meek is really great on paper. It's a 3 cost 2/2, and whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1 colorless. If you do, draw a card. I thought this was great. Then I found out that I don't really need it too much. I ended up never getting to use that ability because I was all tapped out, or I had other things to do with my mana during the turn, and because the deck is just so fast that I don't really I ended up not having the use for this ability too much, but it is definitely a good card, and especially the further you get into the game, because then this card turns other early game creatures into something a little bit more valuable, a card drawer as well. So yeah, definitely not a bad card by any stretch of the imagination. Here's the other. Here's the alternative to arms, as it's called. It's a 3-cost instant with Radiance, one of the Boros guild mechanics, one of the only guild mechanics, if not the only one, that actually made it into Magic 2013 so far. I still think that there's a case to be made that the Haunt mechanic will see the light of day, and not entirely sure about the Gruul guild mechanic, but certainly not the Demir transmute. Radiance means that when that this spell targets a creature or a permanent, but in this case a creature, and each other creature that shares a color with it, doesn't matter if it's your opponent or your own. Those creatures get the same effect as that targeted creature. So if you're playing against, let's say, goblins, and you target your own creature, and you target a dual-colored creature, for example, a Sky Knight Legionnaire, or a Boros Veteran, or isn't that the name of it? No, Boros Swiftblade, which is a dual-colored creature, red-white, then all red creatures and all white creatures becomes untapped and get +2/+0, and basically that can hurt you. But this deck has a lot of first strike in it, so that might help you as well, because it doesn't buff the toughness of either your creature or your opponent's creature, and that's significant. It's a great card in my opinion, and it will certainly surprise your opponent, and in many cases you'll get to play against decks where it's not effective. It also kind of makes the case that you might want to run a few mono-colored creatures in this deck, just to have something to target. So if you're playing against goblins, you might want to play the veteran armorer, or target the veteran armorer, so all of your side except for the red cards or red creatures become bigger, but your opponent's creatures doesn't. Yeah, it's a little tricky, but it's very interesting. I'm running 3 of it because it's a great card, and there are too many times where your side is significantly benefits from being buffed in front. Alright, Sky Knight Legionnaire. I ended up taking out one of them, I guess. Okay. Well, that's a shame. I'll eventually find a place for the 4th one, because I used to run 4 of them, and I probably will again. It's just such an amazing card. There are different things that make it amazing. It's a 3-cost 2/2 flying with haste. The haste part and the flying part in combination is amazing, because it's something that your opponent doesn't see coming, or even if they do, they usually don't have much of a response that wouldn't also be a response to any other creature. It's a great card in that sense. The fact that you can drop it and swing in the same turn is great. The fact that it's dual colored, which means that it gets buffed by the dual color buffers, it makes it great. And the fact that you have other cards that that give it 2/2 in front when you attack, instead of just +1, is just makes this very, very powerful. And it makes it so that it's stronger than the Peacekeeper Weenie card, and it's stronger than the Goblin Weenie card, because you draw from 2 different colors, cross buffing effects. Breath of Fury is on paper pretty interesting, but in reality I didn't find a lot of use for it. There's a different card that's better in my opinion. It's a 4-cost aura, and enchanted creature deals combat damage to a player. Sacrifice when enchanted creature deals combat damage to a player, that means that it's unblocked. sacrifice it and attach it to another creature you control. If you do, untap all your creatures, and after this phase there is an additional combat phase. So basically, as long as you have a creature, you can keep swinging in with this guy. That's going to be useful sometimes. It's not going to be useful all the time, but it's certainly I can't fault anyone for putting this card in their deck just for those times where your opponent has just blocked and lost his last creature. You cast this on one of your creatures, swing in, and then you just keep swinging in until you have your opponent have no more life or you have no more side, and have damaged him severely. So yeah, that's it's a pretty powerful card in that respect, but I just didn't find a lot of use for it when I played. Breath of Life, I think there's two of them. It's a pretty great card as well, in at least on paper, but I didn't find a lot of use for it because there's just so many. Like if you lose a guy in this deck, there's another guy coming that's almost equally as good. But maybe I'll consider putting one of them in there. But I think once you put a certain kind of card, for example this kind of card, into your deck, you kind of tell yourself that this is part of your strategy, that you can lose creatures and go get them at some point. I would rather have a more aggressive strategy, telling my opponent then, yeah, remove my creatures because I have more coming and they're coming fast. I think that's the kind of strategy I want to run with this deck. But it's a great card, and as been said before, for example by Wingspan TT, the white cards used to have a lot of return from graveyard spells. Now it's pretty much black that runs that domain, or runs that spell effect. It's not something you usually see in white cards that often. I think it was 1 or 2 years ago, maybe in the last year's iteration, there was another white card that did the same pretty much. But it's certainly a great card, and it's nice to see Wizards putting re-emphasizing this ability or this spell effect for the white side of things. Yeah, okay, Bright Flame is such a great card. I thought it would be just too expensive to be of any use, but it is kind of expensive. It's a 4-cost and X, and it has Radiance, and it deals X damage to target creature and each other creature that shares a color with it. You gain life equal to the damage dealt this way. It's certainly a good card. It's certainly expensive, but it's not so expensive that it doesn't have its uses. I found use for it casting it at 5 altogether. I found use for it casting it up to 8. I think that's the most expensive, or that's the most I've put into this card. That is the 4 basic mana, the 2 white and the 2 red, and 4 extra mana, and pretty much wipe my opponent's side. It's just such a great card, and you will get to at least the 6th land drop or 5th land drop or 6th land drop, and it's going to make a difference, especially if you cast the spell first and swing in with some first strikers or double strikers, because then their creatures are going to be hurt, and your creatures is going to take advantage of it. Great card nonetheless, but I think 2 is a little bit too expensive. Flamekin Sillard is a 4-cost Elemental Berserker 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, it gives your creatures +1/+1 and haste. It's basically an expensive version of the Goblin Bushwhacker, I think it's called. But it does work well with this deck, also because it is a dual-colored card, and it does take advantage of the dual-colored cross-buffing. Aside from that, it's not too spectacular, and that's why I only run one of them. Because if it was like Goblin Bushwhacker and you could just Like you could pay it or play it for 1 or for 2, then this card would be a lot better, even if it was just a 1/1. The fact that it gives your side +1/+1 and haste is really really great, even if it's only for a turn. But when you have to pay 4 for it, you better hope that you don't that you don't need to do other combat tricks at the same time. That's gonna cost you mana. So yeah, if one of them is good enough for me. Sunhome Enforcer is a decent card. I don't know. It's I think at 4 it's a little unspectacular. And since this card has no life-gaining synergies like March to War had, I don't really see the point of it too much. I think if you run this card, you're kind of missing out on some of the other good cards that you could be running instead. Lightwielder Paladin is on paper also pretty amazing, but you have to play against black or red for it to be great. It's a 5-cost 4/4 with first strike, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may exile target black or red permanent that that player controls. That's pretty good. I mean, if it also had protection from those colors, then that would make it a lot easier to swing in there and remove those permanents. But until then, I don't know. I mean, it's a great card against Rakdos or the Grinning Malice. Let's not fool ourselves. But I don't know. I think it's a bit circumstantial, bit too circumstantial. Bull Ceradon, I was kind of on the fence about taking it out of the deck, but it's just such a good card. But it's still expensive, and I don't want to be caught the first 4-5 turns with this card in hand, just thinking, okay, give me mana, make sure I make that land drop so I can drop this guy. I would much rather have the smaller guys or the earlier drops that actually does something for my deck, instead of just being a huge guy that I can swing in with and block with at the same time. And the vigilance thing is nice, but you do have effects that'll kind of give you a vigilance-like effect by surprise. So yeah, by all means run it if it works for you, but I think it's a little expensive for my taste. Hammerfist Giant is a fun trick, but it's and it's a nice game ender, because if you drop it when your opponent is down to 4, and he's going to be sweating bullets, definitely. He's going to be thinking hard to try to find a way to remove it before you just tap it and deal 4 damage to each creature without flying and each player. Aside from that, it's not a card that you want early game or mid game, and the fact that it kills itself is just stupid. I mean, I thought about, I think I also talked about this, like if you have the veteran, or sorry, if you have veteran armor down, and then use its ability. Sure, it kills the veteran armor, but it doesn't kill the Hammerfist Giant. Well, it kind of does, because it loses its toughness buffing when the veteran armor is dead. But then there are some enchantments that does help out with that situation, and there are situations where your creatures are going to be bigger than 4 in the will have more than 4 toughness. So again, too circumstantial, but it's a fun card in some ways, but it's also a bit clunky and way too expensive for me. Sunblast Angel, well, it's just a good card. It's a 6-cost 4/5 with flying, and when it enters the battlefield, it destroys all tapped creatures. Yeah, but I found my side to be so powerful that I couldn't. It was difficult for my opponent to actually swing in. So it's also very circumstantial. It's circumstantial to begin with, but it's only going to be working for you sometimes, and then you're going to be sitting there just waiting. Nah, am I going to use it on one guy, or can I in some way lure him into attacking with more creatures and so on? And maybe that's not going to be beneficial for you, in the sense that you have to, like, you can't block them, because or else why would your opponent swing in with everything? And yeah, it's I don't know, it's again, it works, it's one card that takes away a space for another card that could be more beneficial to the general theme of the build that I'm trying to put together. That's not saying it's not an amazing or great card, because it definitely is. Here's a fucking amazing card, but it's just way too expensive for me. If the other card, if the 6-drops was too expensive for me, then this card is way too expensive for me. It's a 7-cost dragon, the Balefire Dragon here, with flying, 6/6, and when it deals combat damage to a player, it deals that much damage to each creature that that player controls. Okay, say no more. That's pretty insane. It's difficult to get rid of as well, but again, it's a little too expensive. But there's no doubt that once you drop this guy, it's gonna do some damage. One of the better expensive creatures I've seen in this year's format, definitely. And here's a way too expensive card to run, but that is just completely insane. Stormherd, 10-cost sorcery. Put X 1/1 white Pegasus creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield, where X is your life total. Okay. What is need to be said after that? Like, if you're lucky enough to make it to, like, there are some life gain effects in this deck. Imagine being at 25, dropping this guy, 25 white Pegasus creatures with flying. That's just gonna ruin your opponent's day severely, or maybe make him happy to be on the end of that stick and have a story to tell. Anyways, let's move on to the creatures I do have in my deck, and you'll see that it's chosen to give me quite a bit of mountains. But again, just like with the Simic deck, with the Sky and Scale deck, you have 21 lands, which makes the mana distribution a little bit better than it is in some of the other dual-colored decks. Just slightly. The fact that you have one more land in there is actually something. It actually makes a difference. A Soulstroke, already talked about it, run 1. Boros Recruit, already talked about it, run 2. Lightning Serpent, I was really on the fence about whether or not I wanted to run this card, but it's turned out to be quite the bomb. It's turned out to be something that your opponent doesn't expect, something that also gains from the buffing, cross-buffing cards that you have. It's really an awesome card in that sense that when you get to land drop, let's say 7, instead of dropping that Balefire Dragon, when you should at this point have your opponent down to his knees, just cast the Lightning Serpent, and it's going to be coming in for 8. And you probably have some enchantments that's gonna make it even bigger, or some creatures that is gonna buff it and make it even bigger. So it's gonna be coming in for perhaps 10, or even if it's less, even if it's only 7, it's gonna be significant because it has haste and trample. And while you have to sacrifice it at the end step, it's gonna be a huge deal for your opponent to deal with this creature. Boros Guildmage, yeah, I didn't think I was going to like it as much, but the fact that you can just give first strike or haste to your creatures for 2 is just so significant. It's really, really good because you can use it early, while many of the other guild mages have 4-cost or 3-cost or even 5-cost abilities. I think the Boros Guildmage is really well balanced in that sense, and it's very, very cheap in that sense. So a great card. It's not the most amazing abilities, but it certainly makes a difference for this deck. And it's dual colored as well. I think this is a theme of my introduction to this deck, this video in general, is that every time something is dual colored, it's just that much better. The Boros Swiftblade is great. The fact that it's only 1 in front doesn't mean a whole lot because it's gonna be buffed. There are too many things that's gonna make it bigger and greater. But it's a 2-cost 1/2 double strike. Not much else to say about it. Here's a classic Lightning Helix. I'm running all of them, all 3. 2-cost, deals 3 damage to target creature or player, and you gain 3 life. Just a great removal card. Just a fucking fantastic removal card, that is. Here's the Rise of the Hobgoblins, already talked about it, pretty good. 2 arms, already talked about it, also pretty good. Veteran Armorer, already talked about it, very good. Aggravated Assault, that's the better alternative for, what's it called, here we go. Breath of Fury. It's an enchantment, not an aura, but an enchantment. It's a 3 cost, and for 5, even if you make it to land drop 10, you can do this twice, but just for 5, untap all creatures you control. After this main phase, there's an additional combat phase followed by an additional main phase. Activate this ability only anytime you can cast a sorcery. That's pretty fucking fantastic in my opinion. So I run it, and I've gotten much more use of it than I've gotten out of Breath of Fury. So definitely consider run this, because it's very, very strong. It doesn't sack your creatures. It's a nice way of annoying your opponent a hell of a lot. Fire at Will, already talked about it. I run 1. Here's a nice card, Intimidation Bolt. It's a 3 cost, and it deals instant, by the way. It deals 3 damage to target creature, and other creatures can't attack this turn. Here's a little tip for you. Don't cast it on your own turn. Cast it on your opponent's turn while you mess up his side. If you absolutely must cast it on your turn, cast it in your second main phase, or if you don't plan to attack. Rally the Righteous, already talked about it. I run 3 of them. A great card. Here's another fucking fantastic card. It's an aura, it's a 3 cost, and it's really, really good, especially because you run so many dual colored creatures. If you cast it on a red creature, it gets +1/+1 and fire breathing, but not only for red mana but also for white mana. So no matter which land you tap, you give this creature +1/+0. That's very, very cool. That's much better than normal fire breathing. And as long as the creature is white, it gets +1/+1 and has lifelink. So here's a scenario. Turn 2, Boros Swiftblade. Turn 3, Scourge of the Nobilis. That's going to be a 3/4 double striker with lifelink and fire breathing. How do you like them apples? I like them a lot. Sky Knight Legionnaire, already talked about it. It's one of my favorites, at least in this deck. Bright Flame, already talked about it, great card. Faith Fetters, only one that you get to run in this deck. A bit of a shame though, but it's a 4-cost aura that targets a permanent, and this permanent cannot attack or block, and it cannot use its activated abilities unless they're mana abilities, and it gains you 4 life. So it's a nice way of tying down. It's a nice way of tying down certain cards on your opponent's side. I would say that it's not that effective. You can't, for example, you can't tie down a land, and it'll give you 4 life, but that land will still be able to tap for mana. So there are better cards in that sense, but it gains you 4 life, and it's I guess it's decent. It's a great, good card. Great. I don't know about that. Flamekin Sealer, 4-cost 2/2, already talked about it. And here's one of the stars of the show, the Glory of Warfare enchantment, of 4-cost. As long as it's your turn, your creatures get +2/+2. As long as it's not your turn, it gets +2/+0. And as long as it's not your turn, they get +0/+2. Just such a great card. It makes your attacks more offensive. That's not the right way to put it. It makes your offense way stronger. It makes your defense way stronger. So yeah, good card, definitely. And the fact that you get to run 2 of them is amazing, because if you have 2 of them down, and it can happen, you get to swing in for +4/+0, and on your opponent's turn, he gets to fight with creatures that are buffed with +0/+4. A bit difficult to take care of, I would say. Here's a card that I love. I've heard people not being a little bit skeptical about whether or not this card is effective or not, but I like it. I like it a lot. It's Nightmare's ugly cousin, Spite-Mare. It's a 4-cost 3/3, and whenever it's dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target creature or player. that's going to be significant, and it's certainly helped me out. It's a great indirect removal card, you could call it. Very, very cool. Here's another good guy, Agros Kos Wojciech Veteran. I didn't think he was that good in March to War, but he's really, really good in this deck because you have so many dual-colored creatures. It's a 3/3, and whenever he attacks, all other attacking creatures that are either which are red gets +2/+0, and all other attacking creatures that are white gets +0/+2. So a lot of your creatures are gonna get +2/+0 from this card alone. And you can see this is a pretty interesting and efficient way of making basically battle cry or having a battle cry effect. And for your Boros Swiftblade, this guy is just gonna make him huge and ugly and wonderful. Balefire Leash is probably the best leash there is. It's a 5-cost, 2/4, and other red and white creatures get +1/+1. So basically dual-colored creatures get +2/+2. Whenever you cast a red spell, Balefire Leash deals 3 damage to target player. Huh. Well, that's just insane. But it gets worse. Or better, depending on which end you are of this creature lightning helix. Whenever you cast a white spell, you gain 3 life. So, have this creature down, cast a lightning helix, do 6 points of damage to the face, and gain 6 life. What the fuck? This guy is amazing. Just such a good card. Bassandra Baboom, the Battle Seraph, 5-cost, 4/4, flying. Players can't cast spells during combat, and for 1 red, target creature attacks this turn if able. Here's the thing about Bassandra. She fucks up my whole combat trick thing, but the tertiary ability, the fact that she can make your opponent's creatures attack, so I can control which creatures he attacks with, and I can pick off the creatures that are doing some passive effects that screw up my plans. That makes her very, very valuable. And she is like, she sticks out like a sore thumb in the sense that she doesn't really help the theme of the deck, but she does help another theme of the deck, that is that you get to kind of like what's it called? The spell in embarrassing, I can't remember it, but in Pack Instinct, there are these there's an instant spell, I think, and a creature that makes it so that 2 creatures basically have to fight, and you can use it as removal, because of course you just choose choose your bigger creature and your opponent's smaller creature and make them fight, and then your opponent's smaller creatures dies. This Bassandra basically does the same. It just takes a little bit longer, and she can do it with multiple creatures each turn. So that's great. That's a really good way of removing your opponent's creatures and having control of their situation. It kind of screws up their plans a little bit. So yeah, and the fact that that players can't cast spells during combat doesn't necessarily hinder you or as much as it also hinders your opponent, because your opponent can't go for the throat your creature during combat. He has to do it just when you use Bassandra's ability to force creatures to attack. So yeah, in my opinion, it's a fantastic card, and not making room for her would be a mistake. But you have to be aware of when it's beneficial for you to cast it and when it's not. Here's another guy that I really didn't get to test out too much, because I think it was the second to last card that you unlock. It's a 5-cost 3/4 with flying, and attacking creatures you control gets +2/+0, basically double battle cry. It's very, very cool in my opinion, and it's I'm pretty sure that this is going to be a difference maker. And the fact that it's only a well only it's a 5 cost made me take out that second Bull Ceradon as well, because this card just does more for my side. Oh, there's a third Bull Ceradon. Well, excuse me. So I did include one. Okay. Might end up taking it out and put in a Breath of Life or something else. But right now, I guess it's a nice bomb. But yeah, yeah, not much else to say. I think what really speaks for its defense is the fact that it's dual colored and it has vigilance and haste. It's a great card, definitely, but certainly not more than one. I don't have room for it, at least. Firemane Angel is great in many respects. As a creature, it's a little expensive. It's a 6 cost 4/3 flying first strike. Not that spectacular, but that being said, it gives you or it gains you 1 point of life every turn as soon as you either cast it, or it's milled, or discarded to the graveyard, or it dies and is put into the graveyard. As long as it's not in your as long as it's not in your deck or library, as long as it's not in your hand, and as long as it's not in or in exile, it gains you 1 life each turn. I think that's pretty significant. That's certainly gonna help you out, even though it's only 1 life each turn. It can be a difference maker, and the fact that it's a decent creature as well, albeit a little expensive, is pretty good. Her tertiary, or I would say, how do you say fourth? Well, fourth, that's how you say it. Ability is very expensive. It's for 10 mana you can return her from your graveyard to the battlefield. The fact you don't return it to your hand but to the battlefield is pretty nice, but 10 mana, how often is that gonna happen? Anyways, this is my build. This is the deck all in all. I hope you liked it. I certainly like it. As you've noticed probably, there are only in this deck and in the Sky and Scale deck, there are only 30 cards to be unlocked, and that is because Wizards have chosen not to include promo cards for these 2 decks. And for those of you thinking that it might come down the line, it might. It certainly might. But what's it called? The community manager, Sean. He has written on the forums that there's currently no plans of including any kind of promo cards in the new DLC decks, and that's a bit of a shame, because it adds breadth, and it adds diversity, and it adds possibilities of building different kinds of decks. And I think I would definitely go on the record and say that I would be able to pay money for a DLC that was no new decks, just 10 more cards to each deck that's out there, or a significantly smaller amount of money for a DLC that adds 10 more or 20 more cards to the new DLC decks, all 5 or 6 that we're in for. So just because it adds much more diversity to the deck building, and it makes it so that people are not running in entirely same builds. It makes the game and the decks much more interesting. So yeah, I guess that's that, and I can't see how long this video has become, because I don't have a stopwatch or whatever it's called, in which I don't have any means of seeing how long this video is at the moment. So instead of instead of rambling on, I would just say thanks for watching, and I hope you stuck with me all the way. Either way, if you liked it, please leave a like. If not, that's fine. But I would appreciate any comment. I would like to hear if how you built the deck, what you are looking forward to. If you haven't bought the deck yet, or if you haven't unlocked the cards yet, which cards are you looking forward to unlocking, and which combinations are you looking forward to using? So all in all, thanks for watching and later.